Hello and welcome to Love Thy Lawyer, where we talk to real lawyers about their lives in and out of the practice of law, how they got to be lawyers, and what their experience has been. I'm Goodman, the host of the show, and yes, I'm a lawyer. Nobody's perfect. He has served as an Alameda County Deputy District Attorney for more than 30 years. He is currently assigned to the Alameda County Narcotics Task Force. In that capacity, he works closely with frontline police officers from a variety of agencies. He also has extensive experience prosecuting and managing every type of criminal matter known to the court system. We have litigated numerous matters against each other, and it is my privilege to know him. George Wood, welcome to Love Thy Lawyer.
Oh, great. Thanks, Lou. It's nice to be here.
Tell me about the assignment that you have right now.
Well, I love it, actually. So the assignment I have right now, I'm assigned to the Alameda County Narcotics Task Force, as you said, and it is a team of detectives that have been put together by various agencies. And each agency, such as CHP, Oakland Police Department, Alameda PD, BART, our probation department, and the Sheriff's Office, along with several other agencies, will assign an officer to the task force for approximately a 2-year period. As part of that task force, it's their job to try and focus on narcotics cases that are higher level in terms of quantity of narcotics being trafficked and the sophistication of the types of cases.
Where's your office located? Which building are you in?
Yeah, so my actual office that I spend the most time at is at what we call Echo J. It's the East County Hall of Justice, the DA's office there on Gleason Drive here in Dublin. But the task force itself operates out of location off of, I think, East 12th, off of 23rd Avenue in Oakland. So I do spend time out there as well. I kind of bounce back and forth between the two.
Has the COVID affected the way that either you work or they work or the way you work together?
It's affected the way I work a little bit in the sense that it's slowed things down inside the courtroom for me.
Where are you from originally?
From Orinda. I was actually born in Oakland at Peralta Hospital, which my grandfather was the head of, actually, but grew up in Orinda.
Is that where you went to high school?
Yeah, I attended Narcotics High School. It's funny because when we first moved, when I was first growing up in Orinda, we were on kind of the poorer side of town over closer to the high school. And then as we got older, my grandparents had some property over by the country club. So we built a house over there and moved over there. And that's where I finished my years in Orinda.
At Miramonte?
Yes.
How was that experience for you?
I think it was a good experience. I really felt like we grew up at a good time. I mean, there were very serious things going on, obviously, in those days. Part of the reason I think why we were living in Orinda, because at least my mom grew up in Oakland. And, you had the Vietnam War that was going on for a while, and you had a lot of social unrest at the time. But Orinda was a world away from a lot of that. And, I'm sure my parents were deathly afraid that we were going to run off to Haight-Ashbury, which was only really, 40 minutes away from where we were at. But those fears were absolutely groundless. We lived in an area where there was open space, so we could just, as kids, run up into the hills all day long and come down for lunch and come down for dinner and then go back up the next day. So, those were great summers. The schooling in Orinda was very good.
After you got out of high school, where'd you go to college?
I went to UC Santa Barbara. I thought about going to UC Berkeley, but I probably would have lived at home my first year. And part of the whole college experience is getting away from home and kind of trying to dip your toes in the water of establishing your independence and finding out what it's like to be away from home and all. But I wanted to go to UC school, and Santa Barbara was far enough away that if it was a holiday weekend like Thanksgiving or something like that, I could actually drive back. But it's not like I was going to be commuting on a nightly basis. And the setting was wonderful. You couldn't ask for more. You have the beach right there, and the campus is beautiful. So I spent 4 years there. But I know a lot of people that were on the 5 or 6 year plan because it's such a nice place.
Well, what was your experience like there?
It was good. Let's see. So on the study side, I'd known very early on that I wanted to pursue a career as an attorney, but there was no real pre-law major, if you will. And so I started off as a poli-sci major, and I ended up hating it because it just seemed like it was people trying to force their opinions and ideas on other people. And so I switched to history, and I loved history. It was fantastic. Not just because I could just go to the beach and read a book on the beach about history and get a decent grade in class, but I just love history. Period. It's a wonderful subject. There's so much to learn and so much to learn from in that area.
You said that you knew kind of early on that you wanted to be a lawyer. When did you first start thinking about that?
It was probably when I was like 9 years old, and that sounds kind of funny, but
actually, let me just comment on that. I don't think it sounds funny at all, because I've talked to a lot of lawyers in the process of doing this podcast, and I can tell you that most of them say something along those lines. And so I'm curious as to what your experience was as far as kind of coming to some understanding that you wanted to be a lawyer at a very early age. And I put myself in that category as well. Right.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I was exposed, I guess, to kind of the high-level executive stuff very early on. Like I said, my grandfather was president of Peralta Hospital in Oakland. In fact, he traveled the world. He was really a pioneer in hospital administration. From him, I had a lot of exposure to stuff that I otherwise wouldn't have. Growing up, especially in the Orinda area, it kind of seemed like, and I don't want to stereotype it, but it just seemed like everybody was either going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Law was much better fit for me than medicine was. I'll just put it like that. So I knew early on, and it wasn't because my mom loved Perry Mason or anything like that. I just knew from an early stage. And
after you got out of college, did you go to law school directly, or did you take some time off?
No, I went to law school directly. It's funny because having said that I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, I was very lackadaisical about actually taking the LSAT, the LSAT, and in studying for it. But I went in at the last minute. I purchased one of those study books and thumbed through it, and ended up doing really well on the LSAT, and that plus having a decent grade in my major got me into law school.
Where did you go to law school?
I started out at Southwestern, which was in downtown LA, and I went directly from, can't remember if I answered your question up, I went directly from college to law school. And it was culture shock. It's funny because I went from this beautiful campus right on the beach with all the accessories to this building, this ugly building in downtown LA, and I landed amongst students that it all seemed like had watched the movie The Paper Chase one too many times. Ended up transferring. I moved because I was living in Westwood at the time. I moved down to Newport Beach, and went to Western State College of Law, and that's where I ended up graduating from.
What did you think of Western State?
It was okay. Obviously not a big name at the time. I think it was only California accredited, although I think since then it's gotten its ABA accreditation. And I liked, there was a certain amount of informality at the school, which I really liked. There were some really good teachers there. There was a person, one of our teachers, I can't remember, but he had written a book on remedies, and he was excellent. And we had some other good teachers there, a very good contracts teacher, and the atmosphere was more congenial. And it was through there that I had my first taste of actually being in a courtroom doing an internship with the Orange County DA's office. So,
in preparation for this interview, I looked up Western State College of Law, and I was really very impressed with at least their philosophy of having smaller classes and having some, real professor-student contact and mentorship. Was that your experience there?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the instructors were very approachable.
What did your friends and family say or think when you told them that you wanted to become a lawyer and you were going to law school?
Well, I think my parents were real happy because, it's a profession where you have lots of opportunity. In that sense, I think they were overjoyed. So
You mentioned that you had an experience at the Orange County District Attorney's Office. What was your first real legal job?
so I don't know if that qualifies or not.
What's
So
that? Well, let's start there. What was that?
So with the internship, we were basically doing traffic trials. I had to know some bits and pieces of evidence and procedure, and I was in a courtroom and I was in front of a judge, and as a student, not having done this before, you walk in with not a lot of confidence and try the best you can to accomplish what you're there to do, and just soak up as much as you can around you, and that's what I did, and I really enjoyed it. It was my first experience with law outside the classroom, and I thought it was fantastic, and that really turned me on to actually wanting to work for a DA's office at some point in my career.
So what was your first paying legal job?
My first paying legal job. It's funny because I graduated from Western State, and I decided that either I was going to stay down in Southern California and be a beach bum, or I was going to come back up here and actually get a job. And who knows if I made the right decision or not, but I came back up here. Graduating from a very small school down there, you come up here and you're competing against people that have gone to both. They've gone to McGeorge, Hastings, you've got Ivy League people, Stanford, you name it, Santa Clara, Golden Gate. And so, you put your resume out and out of 300 resumes that you send out, you might get 3 responses and 1 maybe. But it's funny, at the time I thought that I would wanted to go into tax law. It was interesting to me, still is, although I'm glad that my career took a different turn. But so the IRS had some openings, and it wasn't in their legal department, but it was in collections. So I became a revenue agent for 2 years, hoping that at some point a position in their legal department would open up and I could apply for it. So that was my first paying job. And so I worked out of the Golden Gate office in San Francisco, and it was an interesting experience. It's funny because you had in the government. I learned a few things about the IRS, but one is that it takes almost a monumental effort to get anything moving at the IRS, but once it starts moving, it's almost impossible for it to stop, right or wrong, what the original decision was. So, and all decisions were really made back in Washington. I stayed 2 years. It was a job that didn't have a lot of discretion, and I felt like I was bumping up against the ceiling of opportunity. So, and at the right time, my next job came along, and that was with the Alameda County DA's office. So,
how did that come about?
So it was funny because I had an uncle on my mom's side, my Uncle Alec, and he ran the concessions down at the Alameda County Fair at the horse races. And years earlier, he had contracts with all the county fairs. But anyway, so he would work 3 weeks out of the summer, make a ton of money. And then I think, contributed to judges' campaigns and things like that. So he got to know some people in the legal system. And I don't know how it came about, but he became friends with Bud Melleling, who was a deputy DA in our office. Fantastic attorney, and anybody who's been around some of the older people in our office, you'll immediately recognize his name. And so my uncle arranged a lunch, and it was my uncle. It's funny. It's kind of like my uncle's Greek. My mom's side of the family is Greek. So it was kind of like the Greek mafia, because you had my uncle who ran the concessions at the horse races. You had a guy there from the meat packing company. You had a guy there from the cement company, and then you had Bud Melleling. And so, Bud was nice enough to inquire about me and ask me if I, was interested in a career with the DA's office, to which I nodded my head. And so eventually I was called in and got interviewed by Chris Carpenter. A few months passed, and I hadn't heard anything. And then just as I had decided to resign from my job with the IRS, I get a call from Chris saying, "Would you like to come and be a deputy DA?" So I had my interview with Jack and Tom Orloff and Dick Eigelhart, who were the 3, and eked past that and started my career in the DA's office.
When you started out in the DA's office, what did you first do there?
Misdemeanor trials. It's funny because in those days, you get hired, you're handed a file and told, "Here, go try this case." so you walk off and do the best you can. fortunately, I didn't go out on my very first day. I had a few weeks, so I got a chance to watch some misdemeanor trials that were going on. So
I've been in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office for more than 30 years now. So obviously there must be something about that you like. So what is it that you really like about being a lawyer, and more specifically, what do you like about being Alameda County Deputy District Attorney?
I love the culture of our office. Right from the beginning, you could walk up to anybody. I mean, there's essentially no such thing as a stupid question in our office, and your people are very non-judgmental. They're very supportive, and they're always trying to get behind you and essentially make you a better attorney. And I like the idea that we're kind of part of a team. In that sense, I guess it's a little bit akin to team sports. Like being a judge, it's a very lonely occupation. You've got to kind of keep your distance from the parties, and you're back alone in your chambers. And this is just the opposite. There's a lot of camaraderie here. I sleep well at night, and I really enjoy the work. I enjoy the people that I work with, and that working with the people is a big part, I think, of the practice of law.
Would you recommend law to a young person as a career choice?
Yeah, I think so. The law is changing a little bit. Like, our system is changing a little bit. The legislature keeps on. They won't leave us alone. They keep tweaking the laws, unfortunately. So, and I'm getting up in age. I'm 60 now. So change it comes harder and harder. But I think it's still a good occupation. I think it will always be a good occupation.
How is actually practicing met or differed from your expectations about it?
It's funny because it's not just a legal job that we do. There's a lot of hand holding, and I don't want. That's probably the wrong term to use because it sounds a little bit de minimis. But we deal with a lot of victims, so we have to sit down, we have to talk to them, we have to educate them about the system, we have to educate them perhaps about their expectations about what is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true from the defense side too. Where we really spend an awful lot of time being social workers rather than really attorneys. And I found that when I was a prosecutor as well, like you say, dealing with the victims and dealing with the witnesses, it's a very people-oriented practice, and it involves things that no one ever really talked about in law school. It's not the evidence code or.
You just can't say no to helping people. That's the nice thing about working for the DA's office is that we're really there to try and help the community, not just from a safety standpoint. And this is, I think, something that our DA, Nancy O'Malley, has emphasized.
What, if anything, would you change about the way the legal system works?
Oh, that's that's a hard question. It's funny because so much of what we do is, well, and that's probably some of what we do is really a roll of the dice. Trials can be a roll of the dice. You never know what's going to happen once the jury gets picked. And in that sense, and there is a certain amount of skill involved in what we do. I would love to see uniformity in the system, and there isn't, because sometimes the skill of attorney can make a difference, and that's good for that attorney, but not always good for the client who doesn't have that attorney representing them.
Do you think that the system is fair?
Yeah, I do. Some people might want to draw the borders of fairness much narrower and say that the system is not fair. But by and large, my experience is that it's been very fair. It's fair as long as everybody is responsible about what it is that their job is. And that starts from the charging deputy in the considerations that go into whether or not a case should be charged or whether or not a case shouldn't be charged, to the pretrial deputy making an offer.
Let me shift gears here just a little bit. What's your family life like, and how has practicing law affected that?
Yeah, it's funny. So my wife Tracy, she's a court reporter, and I met her in Fremont. So I guess I have my career as a DA to thank for my family. And she recently retired, although she goes back to work part-time over in San Mateo County. So we got married in 93, so it's 27 years ago, if I'm counting them correctly. We have 2 children, although it sounds funny to call them children now because I have a daughter that's 22 and a son that's 19 going on 20. So they're not children anymore, but to me they are. Always will be. Early on, it was a bit difficult from a time perspective. We were always juggling, trying to pick up the kids, drop them off from daycare and things like that because we were a 2-worker family, as so many families are. So that was a bit difficult, although it wasn't necessarily anything about the law. I think that made that difficult. Although there were, sometimes some long hours that I would put in, or I would have to go away.
What sort of recreational pursuits do you have?
Oh, let's see. So I was involved for a long time. I really was into cars for a while. It's funny because at one point in our marriage, early in our marriage, my wife was on me to get something a little bit nicer than the car I was driving. So I went out and got a used Aston Martin. And
well, that's nice.
Yeah. So it was funny because it was just when the internet was starting up, and we had, I think, taken out a second to do some work on the house. So I was able to smuggle a little bit of that money away. And so I bought an older Aston and got involved with the Aston Martin Owners Club, and eventually became its chair for the Western United States for several years. Had a really good time with that. Lots of people, famous race car drivers such as Sterling Moss and Carroll Shelby, and some of the older race car drivers, and then just made a ton of friends through that. Neil Peart, who was the drummer for Rush, Derek Bell, who won Le Mans 5 times, Derek Daly, who was a Grand Prix driver in the 70s and early 80s. There were so many people that I met and people that I became friends with, and it was just I don't know, I guess there was just something about car people that clicked with me. Always had a wonderful time, still involved in it a little bit. I've always loved traveling, internationally especially. I'm not well traveled at all within the U.S., but outside I've done a fair amount of international traveling, and I love it. So I'm really looking forward to that aspect.
You mentioned international travel. Where have you been?
So I've been to Europe a number of times. I love the UK, England. I have a really good friend that lives up in York, and York is a beautiful city. It still has the old Roman walls around the outside, and a beautiful cathedral called the Minster inside, and it's got the cobblestone streets and parts of the city and stuff like that. So, and there's just something about being in the UK that I don't know, it just feels very familiar to me. I don't know if that's because my dad's side of the family was from there or what, but so I've been there. Switzerland, where I don't think there's a speck of litter in the whole country. It's everything is just like a postcard there. It's amazing.
If you came into some real money, a few $1 billion, is there anything that you would do differently in your life?
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. I without question would try and help more people, maybe both family and friends, but maybe just as a donor to good causes out there. I mean, it's funny because I had actually one of my Aston Martins that I had actually went up way up in price. I sold it to my friend Neil, and then it went up to over $1 million when he had it. And I thought to myself,
wow.
Well, I don't regret selling it, because if I still had it, I couldn't justify having a car worth that much, not being like a gazillionaire. So, and I always felt like, if I had something that was worth that much, I really had a responsibility, not just to myself, but to those around me, and to make sure that I'm using my finances in a way that benefits the most people.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't discussed, something that you wanted to say? Or
Oh gosh, no, I hate open-ended questions, although I love asking. I've spent 31 years here as a DA. It's been, I don't want to necessarily say fun is the right word, but it's the first word that comes to mind. It's been such an enjoyable career. I've had wonderful people that I've worked with. Some people who are now left the office and retired. I've just had a really good experience with this as a career, and I mean, if I had to do it all over again, I don't think there's anything that I'd do different. Career choices, anyway. It's really been fantastic.
George Wood, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon on Love Thy Lawyer. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Lou. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of Love Thy Lawyer. If you enjoyed listening, please share it with a friend and subscribe to the podcast. If you have comments or suggestions, send me an email. I promise I'll respond. Take a look at our website at lovethlawyer.com, where you can find all of our episodes, transcripts, photographs, and information. Thanks as always to my guests who share their wisdom, and to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Louis Goodman.
One of the first questions I would have asked you is why the heck are you interviewing me?